The Valtheri fleet hung motionless in the obsidian expanse between star systems, their bioluminescent hulls pulsing with nervous energy. Admiral Vex Theta's secondary hearts hammered against her chitinous chest as she studied the tactical display. 3 entire battle groups, over 200 vessels, had simply vanished from the Kepler terminus without a trace, without even a distress beacon. Analysis complete, Admiral, rasped her intelligence officer, Rixus Cortland, his scaled fingers dancing across holographic interfaces. The debris patterns suggest surgical strikes. Precise. Almost artistic in their execution. Vex Theta's compound eyes narrowed to crystalline slits. In her 4 centuries of military service, she had never encountered anything like this. The missing fleets belonged to the hegemony's most aggressive expansion force, the Iron Mandible Legion. They didn't simply disappear, they carved through space like cosmic predators, leaving scorched worlds in their wake. "Show me the recordings again," she commanded, her voice carrying the authority of countless victories. The hologram flickered to life, displaying grainy sensor data from a lone survivor probe. For precisely 13 seconds, the feed showed normal formation flight. Then, as if reality itself had been edited, gaps appeared where massive dreadnoughts had been. No explosion signatures. No energy discharges. Just absence. Deep in the ship's neural processing core, encrypted communications flowed between distant relay stations. 2 names appeared with increasing frequency in intercepted transmissions from dozens of species across the galaxy's rim, White Blueshift and Aurora Jeger. Always whispered. Always followed by coordinates of impossible battles where the strong had fallen to shadows. Lieutenant Kethmar, young and ambitious, leaned forward from his console. "Admiral, there are reports coming in from the Syndicate border. Similar patterns. Entire occupation forces simply gone." The bridge fell silent except for the rhythmic biomechanical breathing of the ship's living systems. Vex Theta had built her reputation on understanding her enemies, predicting their movements, exploiting their weaknesses. But how do you fight an enemy that doesn't appear to exist? "Pull up the xenological databases," she ordered. "Cross-reference any species capable of this level of precision." Hours passed as data streams flowed across her consciousness through neural interface links. The Eternal Dominion possessed reality warping technology, but they were isolationists. The hive clusters could coordinate attacks across vast distances, but their methods were never subtle. The Crystalline Confederacy commanded exotic physics, but they communicated through light song, impossible to hide. Then Rixus discovered something that made his secondary brain stems quiver with unease. "Admiral, I found references dating back nearly 50 standard years. Different sectors, different conflicts, but always the same signature. The oldest files are heavily classified, but they mention Terran phantoms." "Terrans?" Vex Theta's translator struggled with the unfamiliar designation. "The bipedal mammals from the dead system? They lack FTL capability. Their entire species was catalogued as pre-industrial when the survey teams passed through their region centuries ago." But even as she spoke, doubt crept through her thoughts like poison. The galaxy was vast, and the Great Survey had been incomplete. Perhaps something had been missed. The communication array suddenly blazed with incoming priority transmissions. Battle groups across 3 sectors reported the same phenomenon, ships vanishing without explanation, always the strongest first, always with surgical precision. Fear rippled through the hegemony's command structure like a virus. Vex Theta stared into the void beyond her viewport, where distant stars seemed to watch with knowing eyes. Somewhere in that darkness, she now believed, hunters moved with purpose and patience. The galaxy's apex predators were discovering they were no longer alone at the top of the food chain. And in the deepest encrypted channels, where only the highest clearance levels could reach, 2 names continued to appear like digital ghosts, White Blueshift and Aurora Jeger. Captain Zephyr Kane stood before the bridge's primary viewport of the White Blueshift, her reflection ghost-like against the starfield beyond. The ship hummed around her with a frequency that seemed to resonate in her bones, a living thing of human engineering and alien technology, forged in desperation and tempered by decades of silent warfare. "Ma'am, we're receiving confirmation from the Aurora Jeger," reported Tactical Officer Lyrian Voss, her fingers moving across the holographic interface with practiced precision. Captain Mordecai signals ready for synchronized emergence. Zephyra nodded, her steel-gray eyes never leaving the void. Below them, hidden in the quantum foam between dimensions, lay the hegemony's primary staging area for their next expansion wave. Intelligence suggested over 500 vessels, including 3 planet killers designed to sterilize entire worlds before colonization. How long since first contact with the hegemony, Lyrian? 47 years, 2 months, 6 days, Captain. 47 years since humanity's first and only diplomatic mission had returned with horrifying footage of the Veltharies processing centers, massive industrial complexes where entire species were systematically harvested for genetic material and neural patterns. The galaxy, it seemed, viewed lesser civilizations as nothing more than biological resources to be consumed. The official response from Earth's united colonies had been predictable: isolation protocols, defensive fortifications, prayers that humanity's backwater location would keep them unnoticed. But some had chosen a different path. Signal from engineering, Captain, came the voice of Chief Quillen Ashworth through the comm system. Both drives are synchronized and ready. Phase variance is within acceptable parameters. Zephyra closed her eyes and felt the weight of command settle around her like a familiar cloak. The White Blueshift was more than a warship, it was a promise made in darkness, a covenant sworn by those who refused to wait for extinction. She and Captain Thane Mordecai of the Aurora Jeger had been among the first to understand what humanity truly faced, not conquest, but consumption. All stations, prepare for dimensional emergence. Remember, we are ghosts in their machines. We strike hard, we strike fast, and we leave no trace of our presence. The bridge crew moved with choreographed efficiency. These weren't Navy regulars, they were volunteers from across human space, bound together by shared purpose and the knowledge that their existence must remain absolutely secret. Earth's government couldn't be seen as aggressive. Humanity needed time to develop, to grow, to become something that could stand against the galactic apex predators. Emergence in 30 seconds, Lyrian announced. Through quantum entanglement communicators, technology reverse-engineered from a derelict crystalline Confederacy probe, Zephyra felt rather than heard Thane's familiar presence. 2 ships, 2 crews, moving as one organism toward their targets. 10 seconds. The space around them began to shift, reality bending as exotic matter drives translated the ships from their hiding place and folded spacetime back into normal dimensions. For a brief moment, the White Blueshift existed in both states simultaneously, visible and invisible, there and not there. Emergence complete. Targets acquired. Before them spread the hegemony staging area in all its terrible majesty. Massive biomechanical dreadnoughts floated in perfect formation, their living hulls pulsing with bioluminescent patterns. Support vessels scuttled between larger ships like insects tending to their queens. And at the formation's heart, 3 world killers hung like metallic moons, their reality-distorting weapons capable of unmaking the quantum bonds that held matter together. Aurora Jeger reports ready, Lyrian whispered. Zephyra felt the familiar calm descend over her consciousness, the predator's patience that had made humanity the most successful ambush hunters in Earth's evolutionary history. They were outnumbered 500 to 2, but numbers meant nothing when your enemy couldn't see you coming. Begin the harvest, she commanded softly. Both ships shimmered and vanished from normal sensor perception, their adaptive camouflage systems bending light and electromagnetic radiation around their hulls. They became holes in space, detectable only by the subtle gravitational distortions their mass created. The hunt had begun. As the White Blueshift and Aurora Jeger moved toward their targets with lethal grace, Zephyra allowed herself a moment of grim satisfaction. The galaxy's predators were about to discover that they were no longer alone at the apex of the food chain. Humanity had arrived, and they brought with them 47 years of carefully studied violence. Captain Thane Mordecai of the Aurora Jeger watched his tactical display with the focused intensity of a surgeon preparing for delicate work. The hegemony formation spread before him like a 3-dimensional puzzle, each piece representing thousands of alien lives and the potential for countless more deaths if these ships reached their intended targets. Mark the priority vessels, he commanded his weapons officer. World killers first, then command ships, then the heavy cruisers. The Aurora Jeger had been humanity's second ghost ship, constructed in the hidden shipyards of Titan's dark side using technology that officially didn't exist. While the White Blueshift specialized in precision strikes and intelligence gathering, the Aurora Jeger had been designed for one purpose: the complete elimination of large-scale threats. Through the quantum link, Thane felt Zephyr's presence as she maneuvered the White Blueshift toward the formation's eastern flank. Their coordination was beyond mere tactical communication. 47 years of shared combat had created something approaching telepathy. "Weapons ready, Captain," reported his tactical officer. "Quantum torpedoes locked on primary targets." Thane nodded, his weathered face showing no emotion. The quantum torpedoes were humanity's darkest secret, weapons that didn't simply destroy matter but convinced it to stop existing on a subatomic level. No explosion, no debris, just carefully calculated nothing where something had been. "White Blueshift signals ready," came Lyrian's voice through the comm link. "Execute." The dance began with mathematical precision. The White Blueshift struck first, its quantum torpedoes reaching out across the void to touch 3 heavy cruisers on the formation's perimeter. The ships simply ceased, leaving behind empty space that their companion sensors struggled to comprehend. Simultaneously, the Aurora Jeger's weapons found their targets. The first world killer, a massive biomechanical construct capable of sterilizing entire continents, experienced a cascade failure as its quantum structure unraveled. One moment it hung in space like a metallic moon, the next, only confused sensor readings marked where it had been. "Second wave firing," Thane announced calmly. Across the hegemony formation, chaos erupted. Admiral Vex Theta's flagship blazed with emergency signals as ship after ship vanished from tactical displays. The Admiral's compound eyes darted between readouts that made no sense, massive vessels simply disappearing without energy signatures or debris fields. "Full spectrum scan," she shrieked at her sensor operators. These attacks must be coming from somewhere. But the White Blueshift and Aurora Jeger remained invisible, their adaptive camouflage systems operating beyond anything the galaxy's established civilizations had developed. Humanity's gifts had always been pattern recognition, tool creation, and persistence hunting. In the vacuum of space, these ancient skills had evolved into something approaching supernatural lethality. Thane watched dispassionately as the second world killer ceased to exist, followed by 3 command dreadnoughts whose bioluminescent hulls had been pulsing with increasing panic. The remaining hegemony forces began to break formation, their coordinated advance dissolving into desperate evasive maneuvers. "They're trying to scatter," observed his navigation officer. "Let them," Thane replied. "Fear is a weapon too." Through the quantum link, he felt Zephyr's grim satisfaction as the White Blueshift eliminated another cluster of heavy assault vessels. The survivors would carry stories back to their command structures, tales of invisible death and impossible losses. Fear would spread through the hegemony fleet faster than any virus. The engagement lasted exactly 17 minutes. When it ended, 73% of the staging area's vessels had simply vanished. The survivors fled in 12 different directions, their crews' minds fracturing as they tried to process what they had witnessed. "Both ships report successful disengagement," Lyrian announced. "No casualties, no detection." Thane allowed himself a small smile as the Aurora Jeger began its phase shift back into folded space. Another victory in humanity's silent war, another delay in the galaxy's predatory expansion. Earth's children remained hidden, growing stronger while their enemies grew more fearful. As the stars shifted around them, Thane thought about the reports filtering in from across the galaxy. The Syndicate's slave raids had decreased by 60%. The Collective's bio-harvesting operations had pulled back from frontier systems. The hegemony's expansion schedule had been delayed repeatedly as they diverted resources to investigate the phantom attacks. Humanity was buying time, years, perhaps decades of development and preparation. And with each engagement, they learned more about their enemy's capabilities, their weaknesses, their fears. The galaxy's apex predators were beginning to look over their shoulders, and they had no idea what they were looking for. Deep within the White Blueshift's classified archives, Engineer Chief Quillen Ashworth reviewed data streams that would have broken most human minds. 47 years of accumulated intelligence painted a picture of galactic civilization that was both magnificent and horrifying in its scope. The hegemony alone controlled 17,000 star systems. Their biomechanical technology could reshape matter at the molecular level, creating living ships that healed themselves and weapons that evolved to counter any defense. They had consumed 43 species in the past century, processing entire populations into component materials for their expanding war machine. Captain came to engineering. Zephyr's voice cut through his contemplation. "Here, Captain. We need to discuss the phase drive specifications." "My ready room, 10 minutes. Quillen sealed the data archives and made his way through the ship's corridors. The White Blueshift hummed around him with alien harmonics, a synthesis of human engineering and technologies salvaged from a dozen different species. Every component had been acquired through stealth, reverse-engineered in hidden laboratories, and integrated through trial and error that had cost several ships and countless lives. He found Zephyr standing before a holographic display showing the current positions of both ghost ships. Dark circles under her eyes spoke of sleepless nights and the accumulated weight of command decisions that could determine humanity's survival. "The drives are showing stress fractures," she said without preamble. "Both ships. The quantum variance is increasing with each dimensional transition." Quillen studied the technical readouts with growing unease. "How long do we have?" "Best estimate? 6 months before cascade failure becomes probable. Maybe less if we maintain current operational tempo." The implications hung between them like a death sentence. The phase drives were irreplaceable. Their construction required exotic matter that humanity could only acquire through deep space salvage operations. Without them, both ships would be reduced to conventional vessels, visible to enemy sensors and vulnerable to retaliation. "There's something else," Zephyr continued, her voice carrying a weight that made Quillen's stomach clench. "Communications intercepted a hegemony deep probe signal 3 days ago. They're not just investigating the phantom attacks anymore, they're actively searching for the source." She manipulated the holographic display, showing a 3-dimensional map of known space. Red indicators marked hegemony search patterns, spreading outward from attack sites like ripples in a pond. The patterns were methodical, thorough, and inexorably moving toward the outer rim where Earth hung in its isolated obscurity. "How long before they find us?" Quillen asked. "Conservative estimate? 18 months. If they get lucky." She shrugged, leaving the sentence unfinished. Quillen stared at the display, his engineer's mind automatically calculating failure cascades and probability matrices. The mathematics were unforgiving. Humanity had perhaps 1 more year of effective operations before their secret war became an open conflict they couldn't win. "There is one option," Zephyr said quietly. "The Syndicate Archive Facility." Quillen's blood chilled. The Syndicate maintained a massive data repository in the Kepler Nebula, a fortress containing the accumulated knowledge of hundreds of conquered species. The technology stored there could advance human capabilities by centuries, but the facility was protected by defensive systems that made stars look dim by comparison. "That's suicide," he whispered. "Maybe. But if we can penetrate their archives, acquire their dimensional engineering specifications." She turned to face him, her gray eyes reflecting the weight of impossible choices. "It might buy Earth another century of development time. Or it might get both ships destroyed and reveal our existence to every predator species in the galaxy." Zephyr nodded slowly. "That's the mathematics of desperation, Quillen. We're already on borrowed time." The ready room fell silent except for the ship's harmonics and the distant whisper of quantum drives holding them between dimensions. Outside, the galaxy continued its ancient dance of predator and prey, consumption and extinction. And somewhere in that vast darkness, humanity's homeworld spun peacefully around its ordinary star, unaware that its children fought a war measured in shadows and silence. "How does Mordecai feel about this?" Quillen asked. "The same way we all do. Terrified and determined in equal measure." Quillen closed his eyes and thought about Earth, about blue skies and green forests, about cities full of people who had never seen a hegemony bioship or witnessed the Syndicate's processing centers. About a species that had barely learned to walk between the stars but was already dancing with monsters in the dark. "When do we begin planning?" he asked. Zephyr's smile was sharp as a blade and twice as cold. "We already have." The Syndicate Archive Facility hung in the Kepler Nebula's heart like a crystalline cancer, its fractal geometry bending spacetime around itself in patterns that hurt to perceive directly. Captain Thane Mordecai studied the structure through filtered displays, knowing that unshielded observation could fracture human consciousness beyond repair. Defensive grid analysis complete, reported his tactical officer. 14,000 automated weapon platforms, reality distortion fields operating at Class 7 intensity, and something our sensors can't identify at the facility's core. Thane nodded grimly. The Syndicate had built their archive to preserve the knowledge of consumed civilizations, creating a monument to galactic predation that contained technologies beyond current understanding. The defensive systems were designed to stop entire fleets, not two ships operating in dimensional phase variants. Through the quantum link, he felt Zephyr's presence aboard the White Blueshift, positioned on the nebula's opposite side. Their approach would need to be perfectly synchronized, two needles threading through a weapon-dense environment that could vaporize matter at the quantum level. Signal from White Blueshift, his communications officer announced. Captain Kane reports ready for synchronized insertion. Begin approach sequence, Thane commanded. Both ships shimmered deeper into phase variance, becoming quantum ghosts that existed between dimensions. The technique pushed their drives to theoretical limits, but it was their only hope of avoiding the archive's sensor networks. As they approached the outer defensive perimeter, Thane felt the familiar weight of command decisions that could doom not just his crew, but humanity's future. The archive contained the technological secrets of hundreds of species, dimensional engineering, exotic matter manipulation, consciousness transfer protocols. Knowledge that could transform Earth from a hidden backwater into a galactic power. Or it could contain traps that would reveal their presence to every predator species in the galaxy. Outer perimeter in 30 seconds, his navigation officer reported. Reality distortion fields are significant. Through the filtered displays, Thane watched space itself bend around the archive facility. The Syndicate's defensive systems didn't just destroy intruders, they convinced local physics that the intruders had never existed. Several automated weapon platforms hung motionless in the void, their dark metal surfaces reflecting nebula gases and patterns that suggested malevolent intelligence. White Blueshift signals ready, came the tense voice of his communications officer. Execute. Both ships plunged into the defensive grid like phantoms diving through reality's fabric. The phase variance drives screamed with stress as they maintained dimensional displacement while navigating around weapon platforms that operated on 11 different physics paradigms simultaneously. Thane watched as hull integrity readings flicker between stable and catastrophic as exotic energy fields washed over the Aurora Jeger. The ship's adaptive systems worked frantically to maintain coherence while reality distortion waves tried to convince its matter that it should be somewhere else. Hull breach on Deck 7, came engineering's report. Dimensional flux is causing molecular displacement. Compensate and maintain course, Thane ordered, his voice steady despite the growing certainty that they were flying through their own funeral. The White Blueshift appeared on his tactical display as a ghost image, its quantum signature fluctuating wildly as it navigated its own path through the defensive maze. Zephyr was pushing her drives even harder, threading between reality distortion fields that could erase a ship from existence without leaving behind even the memory of its passing. Inner perimeter approaching, his tactical officer announced. The facility's core structure is. Captain, I don't think our sensors are interpreting this correctly. Thane studied the readings and felt his certainty dissolve into quantum uncertainty. The archive's central structure appeared to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, its geometry shifting between configurations that violated basic physics. The Syndicate had built more than a repository, they had created a structure that existed partially outside normal spacetime. It's a dimensional anchor, he whispered, understanding flooding through him. They're storing the knowledge in folded space. Which meant accessing the archives would require matching their dimensional frequency, a process that would make both ships visible to every sensor array in the nebula. Through the quantum link, he felt Zephyr reach the same conclusion. Their mission had just transformed from difficult to impossible. Signal from White Blueshift, his communications officer reported. Message reads, no choice now. Begin frequency matching. Thane closed his eyes and felt the weight of humanity's future pressing down on his consciousness. They had come too far to retreat, penetrated too deeply into the galaxy's most secure facility to abandon their mission. But success would expose them to retaliation that could doom Earth itself. All stations, prepare for dimensional frequency matching, he announced. "We're about to become very visible to some very dangerous people." The Aurora Jeger began to shift frequencies, its quantum signature blazing across the electromagnetic spectrum like a beacon announcing humanity's presence to the galaxy. Reality shattered around the White Blueshift as its dimensional frequencies synchronized with the Syndicate archive. Captain Zephyr Kane felt the ship's quantum signature blazing across multiple dimensional layers, announcing their presence to every sensor array within 50 light-years. "Defensive systems are responding," Lyrian Voss reported, her voice tight with controlled fear. "Automated platforms are converging on our position. Estimated time to weapons range, 4 minutes." Zephyr stared at the archive's central structure through displays that filtered its impossible geometry into shapes human minds could process. The facility's core pulsed with information density that made stars look empty by comparison, the accumulated knowledge of hundreds of extinct civilizations compressed into crystalline matrices that existed partially outside normal space-time. "Aurora Jeger reports successful frequency match," came the communications update. "Captain Mordecai signals ready for data extraction. 4 minutes to acquire technology that could save humanity." 4 minutes before the galaxy's most sophisticated defensive grid turned both ships into exotic matter. The mathematics of desperation had never been more precise. "Begin extraction," Zephyr commanded. Both ships extended quantum tendrils toward the archive's core, their computer systems interfacing with information storage technologies that operated on principles beyond current human understanding. Data flowed like luminous rivers between the facility and their ships, dimensional engineering specifications, exotic matter manipulation protocols, consciousness transfer matrices, and technologies whose purposes remained incomprehensible. "Extraction at 12%, engineering reported. The data density is incredible. We're downloading the equivalent of entire civilizations' knowledge bases." Through the archive's data streams, Zephyr glimpsed fragments of the galaxy's hidden history. The hegemony had consumed the Valkyrie Empire after a war that lasted 3 centuries. The Syndicate had processed the crystal singers of Andromeda into quantum computing substrates. The Collective had harvested the gas dancers of the Magellanic Bridge, incorporating their consciousness-weaving abilities into hive mind protocols. 43 species had died to build the galaxy's current power structure. 43 civilizations reduced to archive knowledge and repurposed biological matter. 45 seconds to weapons range, Lyrian announced. Extraction at 37%. The archive's defensive systems moved with purpose that suggested malevolent intelligence. Weapon platforms arranged themselves in perfect geometric patterns, their exotic energy fields beginning to interact in ways that would soon tear local spacetime into quantum foam. "Captain," came Quillen's voice from engineering, "I'm detecting something else in the data streams." "Recent additions." "Very recent." Zephyr felt her blood chill. "Show me." Her display flickered to life with information that made her question reality itself. The archive contained detailed files on humanity, technological assessments, biological analyses, strategic evaluations. The data was comprehensive, recent, and terrifyingly accurate. "They know about us," she whispered. "They've known all along." The files revealed the galaxy's predators had been monitoring human development for decades. They knew about Earth's location, population, technological capabilities. They knew about the ghost ships, the dimensional technology, the silent war. They had been allowing humanity to operate, using them as unwitting test subjects for new defensive technologies. Extraction at 68%, engineering reported. "But Captain, we need to see this." The files contained something else. New data streams opened across her consciousness, revealing information that changed everything. Hidden among the archived civilizations were records of successful resistance movements, species that had fought back against galactic predation and survived. The phantom coursers of the void reaches. The shadow builders of the far spiral. The echo hunters of the dark margin. Humanity wasn't alone in the darkness. 20 seconds to weapons range, Lyrian announced. Extraction at 84%. Zephyr felt the weight of impossible decisions. They could attempt escape with partial data, or remain and acquire knowledge that might transform humanity's strategic position. But staying meant facing defensive systems designed to eliminate entire fleets. "Signal Aurora Jeger," she commanded. "Prepare for emergency extraction on my mark." Through the quantum link, she felt Thane's grim acknowledgement. Both ships' drives screamed with stress as they prepared to tear themselves from the Archive's dimensional matrix and flee into folded space. "Extraction complete," engineering announced. "All systems ready for emergency phase shift." "Execute!" The White Blueshift and Aurora Jeger vanished from normal spacetime just as the Archive's defensive grid unleashed destruction that turned local reality into quantum chaos. They fled through dimensional tunnels while exotic energy pursued them like luminous death, their ships groaning with stress fractures that spoke of drives pushed beyond theoretical limits. Behind them, the Syndicate Archive blazed with alarm signals that would soon reach every predator species in the galaxy. The silent war was about to become very loud indeed. But in their computer cores, both ships carried something precious beyond measure, proof that resistance was possible, and the technological tools to make it effective. 6 months after the Archive raid, Captain Zephyr Kane stood on the White Blueshift's observation deck, watching Earth's blue marble turn slowly against the star field. The homeworld remained unchanged, peaceful, unaware of the storm gathering beyond its protective isolation. But humanity itself was transforming in ways that would have seemed impossible a year ago. Final report from the construction yards, Chief Quillen Ashworth announced, entering with data tablets that contained humanity's new future. The first batch of Echo-class vessels will be operational within 18 months. The dimensional foundries are producing exotic matter at unprecedented rates. Zephyra nodded, though her expression remained somber. The knowledge stolen from the Syndicate Archive had indeed transformed human capabilities, but it had also confirmed their worst fears. The galaxy's predators had been monitoring Earth for decades, allowing humanity to develop as part of some vast experiment whose purpose remained unclear. "Any word from the resistance networks?" she asked. "3 more have made contact," Quillen replied. The Phantom Corsairs sent technical specifications for something they call reality anchors. The Shadow Builders transmitted dimensional coordinates for hidden manufacturing facilities. "And the Echo Hunters?" He paused, studying his data pad. "They sent a warning. Something called the Convergence is approaching." Through the quantum link that still connected her to the Aurora Jeger, Zephyra felt Thane's presence. His ship orbited on the far side of the solar system, its hull bearing scars from their escape through dimensional space. Both vessels were dying, their drives degrading beyond repair, their exotic matter cores slowly losing coherence. "How much time do we have?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "The White Blueshift has perhaps 2 more dimensional jumps before cascade failure. The Aurora Jeger is in similar condition." Zephyra closed her eyes and felt the weight of endings settling around her consciousness. The ghost ships had served their purpose, buying humanity precious time and knowledge. But their war was ending, even as a larger conflict prepared to begin. "There's something else," Quillen continued quietly. "Deep space monitoring stations have detected massive fleet movements from all 3 predator civilizations. They're converging on this sector." The revelation hung between them like a death sentence. Earth's location was no longer secret. The galaxy's apex predators were coming, and humanity had perhaps a year to prepare for open warfare. "Signal Captain Mordecai," Zephyr commanded. "It's time for the final protocol." The final protocol had been planned from the beginning, a contingency for when the ghost ships could no longer operate. Both vessels would be piloted into the solar system's outer cometary cloud and detonated, their exotic matter cores creating dimensional distortions that would scatter their quantum signatures across light years of space. Any investigation would find only exotic radiation and the burr residue of experimental technology. The White Blueshift and Aurora Jeger would become myths, remembered only in whispered stories among the galaxy's resistance networks. "Captain," Quillen said softly, "it's been an honor." Zephyra smiled sadly. "The honor was humanity's, Quillen. We gave our species a chance." As the White Blueshift began its final journey toward the outer system, Zephyra thought about the data cores hidden throughout human space. Technical specifications for dimensional technology, strategic intelligence on galactic civilization, contact protocols for resistance networks, and most importantly, proof that predation was not inevitable. Humanity would face the coming storm with knowledge, allies, and technologies that transformed them from prey into something unprecedented, a species that had learned to hunt the hunters. The ghost ships' war was ending, but their legacy would echo through the galaxy for generations to come. In hidden shipyards throughout human space, new vessels took shape, ships designed not for stealth but for open combat, carrying weapons that could challenge the apex predator's supremacy. The convergence was coming, but humanity would be ready. As the White Blueshift and Aurora Jeger flew toward their final destination, their quantum signatures began to fade from the galaxy's consciousness. They became legends, whispered stories of ships that existed between dimensions and captains who fought impossible odds. But legends, Zephyr knew, had their own kind of power. And in the darkness between stars, new phantoms were already beginning to stir. The silent war was over. The real war was about to begin.